So, hello everyone. What I want to talk to you about today is kind of funny because I want to talk about joy. And after tussling with the computer for 15 minutes to try and get it to work, it's going to take me a moment to get back there, I think. What I want to talk about today is an excerpt from the Book of Joy, which is Lonnie, who's in residence there right now, put me onto this book. And it's the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. They met for basically a week and spoke about joy. And I think we could all use a dose of joy about now in these relatively dark times on planet Earth, difficult times on planet Earth. And there's a section at the back of the book where he has various practices to examine joy, examine what's in the way of joy, and how to cultivate more of it in our lives. And I thought it would be it would make for some good conversation, as well as maybe tips on how to lighten up a little bit in this world at this moment, because I am firmly of the belief that joy is food for us in the way that laughter, beauty, friendship, love, it's one of the good things in life, right? And we can easily get too bogged down in the negative and forget about simply appreciating our lives. That's one thing Maizumi Roshi used to say all the time: appreciate your life. That we shouldn't forget that part. So the Dalai Lama identifies 8 pillars of joy. And as we're accustomed to in Buddhism, there's always 8 of this, 6 of that, 4 of that. Right? I use this as material for a talk for local Vipassana center the other night, and we got into the discussion of it. And one of the men in the group raised his hand and said, "I'm feeling resistance to this. Why 8 pillars of joy? Why can't there be 9? Why can't there be 10?" So one of the pillars of joy is humor. So it's good to have a little bit of a chance to smile about it. But it just struck me, people are so funny of the out of looking at 8 different pillars of joy. That's what he took out of it, is I'm feeling resisted because why are there only 8? So I suggested he start his own 9 pillars of joy and share that with me. Maybe I'll give a talk on it next time. Let me just read a little bit from his introduction here on how to cultivate, how he cultivates joy. So the Dalai Lama calls it developing mental immunity in part, which is an interesting way to put it. Immunity from, well, all of the sorrow, difficulty. Not that he's talking about cutting off from it, I think, but not letting it ruin our life. We have to be able to take in the difficulties without letting them overwhelm us to the point where for me, if I go too far into that, it's been years now since I've suffered from depression, but in my 20s and 30s, I suffered from it a lot. And a lot of it was from getting overwhelmed by the state of the world, which it was also bad back then. So it's things have always been difficult on planet Earth. That's why these practices have been developed and shared over 2,500 years, right? So the Dalai Lama says that just like physical exercise, practice to bring joy and the positivity into our lives is they support our mental health and our mental immunity in the same way that physical exercise supports our physical health. And as the Dalai Lama says, he finds the science very motivating when he's trying to decide whether to wake up in the morning or hit the snooze button again. I found it amusing that the Dalai Lama has the same issue that I do. And apparently he gets up at 3 or 4 in the morning every morning and does several hours of practice before starting his day. So I would imagine he experiences that a lot, wanting to hit the snooze button. He recommends literally using our attention and awareness to establish neural firing patterns that can help the brain avoid the destructive reactivity that the Dalai Lama says is so toxic to our mental and physical health. And we have to remember what he's lived through, right? Having his country invaded, taken over, having to flee, having monasteries destroyed, monks imprisoned, tortured, and killed. So it's not like this is lightly earned. I'm sure he's been quite to the bottom of his own capacity to embrace darkness, and has had to climb into ways to encourage himself toward the light. So many of these practices, he says, scientifically speaking, appear to integrate and harmonize the brain so we can respond to the inevitable challenges of life with less fragmentation, more integration, less fear and anger, and more ease and joy. So let's move on to the 9 pillars. To cultivate joy and remove those things that get in the way of our natural capacity for joy. So he begins with perspective. And I'll just go through these and then all 8 of them, and then we'll have a chance to talk about them a little bit. So perspective, he says. First, see yourself. He's talking about things that particularly trouble us. So that's the point we're starting from. If it helps you to bring to mind something that you have particular concern about in your life or in the world, that may help with knowing where to put this advice we're getting. So perspective. See yourself and your problem from a wider perspective. Try to step back from yourself and your problem. See yourself and your struggle as if you were watching a movie about your life. Now think about this problem from the future, from a year or a decade before now. Recognize your problem will pass. See how your problem shrinks as you see it in the wider context of your life. He's speaking here more of a personal problem or issue, clearly. But this kind of perspective taking is also something that, well, I personally use it in my own life. For instance, thinking back on things that times where I thought, oh, this is a terrible crisis. This is the end of everything. I'll never be able to move on from this point. And what do you find 5, 10 years later? You look back on it and it seems like nothing from this perspective, right? So this is something we can always adopt in our minds. Same thing goes, though, for larger events. In 1986, I walked across the country with a group called the Great Peace March for Nuclear Disarmament. And it took us 9 months. We walked more than 3,000 miles. It was a group of 600 activists as a demonstration for peace. And I've been thinking back on that a lot from the perspective of the world situation now, and thinking, well, that was in 1986. And we were very concerned about the nuclear situation back then, which at that moment looked very pointed. It seems to have fallen into the background since the dissolution of the original Soviet Union and all of that, but the nukes are all still out there. So my point being that things seemed difficult and dark back then. And then we moved along, and now there's new difficult, dark things to deal with. But the human race has always had these kinds of things. Late in the Buddha's life, the son of King Bimbisara, who had supported the Buddha, who'd been basically a student of the Buddha and had built monasteries for him and supported his work for decades. The king was overthrown by his son, and the son proceeded to invade the kingdom of the Shakyas, which is where the Buddha Shakyamuni came from. And so that must have been a pretty dark time for the Buddha late in his life, to see his country overrun by the adjacent countries whose ruler had been a supporter of him for decades. And then it all switched. And so these things come and they go, and we're not probably, any of us, losing sleep over King Bimbisara now. It's thousands of years ago. So if we're lucky enough to get more thousands of years in the future, these times too will pass. So next pillar, humility. Now see yourself as one of the 7 billion, is it up to 8 billion yet? We might be close to 8 billion, or perhaps we're there. 8 billion people, and your problem is part of the pain and suffering that so many humans experience. This is one thing that helps me a lot, that whatever it is that I'm going through or that is affecting me at the moment can't be that different from things other people have gone through in the past and often overcome. And we're not all that unique. Some version of whatever issue or problem is facing us today has already happened many times in the past, and some version of what's happened to me personally, the same goes for. It's happened many times in the past. And there's ways, well, time will move along, and it's all impermanent. And whether we deal with it or not, it's not that unique. Whether we deal with it well or not, it's not that unique. Fortunately, we have these methods of practice which are incredibly useful. I was just using my practice just now when it took 15 minutes of trying different computers in different ways to get back into the meeting here. And it's definitely, like anyone, I become frustrated when I can't make the technology work properly. And I know you all are waiting, but what a great time to breathe and go back to one's practice, right? Just, this will either pass or it won't, and you all will have to do something else other than listen to my talk if I can't manage to get back on screen. So these are great opportunities for practice. So to continue with what he says about humility, you can see your problem as part of the unfolding and interdependent drama of life on our planet, and even see yourself from space or from a God's eye perspective. Again, he's going back to perspective. See how deeply connected we are with one another. You're part of the flowering of the universe in your particular place and time. Your connection to others makes you much stronger and more capable of solving your problem. Let yourself feel love and appreciation for all of those who've contributed to who you are and who support you in your life. I just started my university class for the semester, my university meditation class for credit. And one of the things that I often ask the class, in fact, I'll ask those of you who are present now, how many of you have ever faced a situation, maybe it was a breakup, maybe it's loss of a job, loss of a living situation, some big event like that where you thought to yourself, I'm so screwed, this is the end of everything, this is, my life is coming crashing down. How many people have you experienced something like that? And later on, discovered it was one of the best things that could have happened because you found other options or you ended up in a different place. Yeah. It's so common, isn't it? It's such a common experience that we don't see the other side of the issue or the crash or the crisis, whatever it is. And we forget how resilient we are and how many other people have been through similar times, similar experiences, and more difficult ones, right? So the next one, he says, humor. He says, is humor. Smile and see if you can chuckle at your problem, at your shortcomings, at your frailties. Try to find the humor in the situation in your struggle. Even if it is a very grave or serious situation, there is often some humor that can be found. Now, humor is very big in my life. I don't know about you all, but a lot of things that are happening these days in the world don't seem so funny, despite the fact that they're absurd. It's not always, at times, it's not always easy to laugh at them. But even in a very grave or serious situation, there's often some humor. This brought to mind when my stepfather was dying, and he was going through one of these, is he going to die? Is he not going to die? Spells that I'm sure a lot of you have been through with elderly relatives. He was in his 80s and looked like he was going to die. We'd all rush back. My parents lived in Miami, so in my case, I'd rush back to Miami, and then he doesn't die, and then he gets better, and then that happened several times. So one of these times, I came back because he was supposed to really be declining. This time, it was really going to be it. He was actually in hospice, and he seemed to be staging one of his miraculous recoveries. And I don't remember what the issue was exactly, but he had a pacemaker, and I think the doctors wanted to adjust something or fix something with his pacemaker, but they can only do palliative care if he's in hospice, right? They can't do care that would actually fix something. They're supposed to just keep him comfortable till he dies. But he seemed to be getting quickly better, and they really wanted to adjust his pacemaker. However, his insurance, this was before Obamacare came in, and whatever his insurance or Medicare or whatever it was, it wouldn't pay for doctor care beyond palliative as long as he was in hospice. And so the doctors, I remember us all consulting with him, and the doctors were saying, well, the only way we can treat him is if we get him out of hospice. But the only way we can get him out of hospice is if there's a big emergency. Of course, in hospice, there's not supposed to be a big emergency. You're supposed to help people die. Well, what they ended up doing somehow is figuring that if they called an ambulance and an ambulance came for him and took him out of hospice and brought him back to the same hospital and put him in a different room, then he'd be there on a different basis and the insurance would cover whatever treatment he needed. So next thing we know, this ambulance comes up, sirens screaming, to hospice, and the attendants rush in with a gurney, and out they take my stepfather, rescuing him from hospice, put him in the ambulance. I think they drove around the parking lot. They come back in and they readmit him from the emergency room, and then the doctors can deal with this treatment. So this is one of those things where it actually was pretty funny that we had to, even Harold, my stepfather, thought it was funny that he has to be rescued from hospice by an ambulance that just takes him back to the same hospital. So human life can be pretty absurd at times. He goes on to say the human drama is often a comedy and laughter is the saving grace. This ability to laugh allows us to accept life as it is, broken and imperfect, even as we aspire for a better life and a better world. So the next pillar is acceptance. Accept that you're struggling and accept that you have human limitations. Remind yourself that these painful realities do happen to us, to those we love, and in our world. Acknowledge that you cannot know all the factors that have led to this event. That, to me, is an interesting line there. This is something the Dalai Lama emphasizes again and again, that we can't see all the different threads that led to this event happening. It's just something I'm still sitting with, why he emphasizes that so much. But it reminds me very much about something that the Buddha says somewhere in the Pali Canon in his original talks, which is the people try and make karma kind of one-dimensional. You know, you're suffering XYZ issue in this time because you've done something that has earned it for you. You know, that's the one-dimensional version, right? Or even in a past life, in the original way that they saw things, that led to this experience happening now. But the Buddha said in his original talks about karma and cause and effect that the human mind can't possibly grasp all the events that led to this situation. It's certainly not as easy or one-dimensional as it might seem to you. Anyway, he goes on to say, accept what has happened, has already happened, and there is nothing you can do to change the past. Now remind yourself, in order to make the most positive contribution to the situation, I must accept the reality of its existence. Interesting. Really, he's speaking against denial, isn't he? That we can't, that denying certain things are happening is not going to be helpful. And again, this is from the ground of his country having been invaded by the Chinese, taken over, and they're probably not going to give it back. So this is where his acceptance, I'm sure, is part of the reason that if you've ever seen the Dalai Lama sitting on a stage somewhere with a convocation of other world leaders, he's often the only one who's smiling, right? He's the only one who has any buoyancy to his presence. Forgiveness is the next one. Place your hand on your heart and forgive yourself for any part you have played in creating this problem or situation. Recognize that you are only human and you will inevitably fall short of your aspirations. You will hurt and be hurt by others. See the shared humanity of any others who are involved and forgive them for their part and for their human limitations. Oh boy, that one's tough sometimes, isn't it? The original Brahma Vihara practices, which the best known one is metta practice, which, well, at the end of the service, the basic metta phrases are always recited: may all beings be happy, may all be safe, etc. There's in the original group of those practices, there was also compassion, equanimity, and mudita, which is joy, but it's joy for another's success. It's a very specific kind of joy. It's a antidote for envy, to be able to take joy in another's good fortune without envying them. But they all work the same way with each repetition of phrases, right? May you be happy, may you be safe, or may you be free of suffering, or may I be free of it. Some version of that. One of the things that's happened in the West since Buddhism's come to the West is if you search online, you'll find especially some of the insight and Vipassana teachers have developed a version of this for forgiveness, where it's like the fifth Brahma Vihara. It operates much like metta practice, where you're repeating, may I be forgiven, may others be forgiven. And it's a good technique. I recommend it. If you have trouble, it's tricky to forgive. It's tricky to let go of past harm that's done to us or current harm. But if you've struggled with that, forgiving yourself or forgiving others, I'd encourage you to look up forgiveness practice, maybe insight meditation forgiveness practice, or Brahma Vihara's forgiveness practice will bring that practice up. And it's very, very useful and effective. So he goes on to say, recognize that you're only human. You'll fall short of your aspirations. You will hurt and be hurt by others. See the shared humanity of others who are involved and forgive them for their part and for their human limitations. It is true, if we're alive on planet Earth in a human body, we are going to inevitably not only be hurt, but will hurt others at times. And so forgiving ourselves is a really important part of any practice. In my university class, we've been working with negative self-talk, which is an issue that lots of us have. This mental, emotional pattern of not being good enough, of never measuring up, of never being successful at whatever it is we aspire to be successful at, not having what it takes. This used to be a really big issue for me, and it's something that I took on through my Zen practice at a certain point after a few years of practice, and I really worked determinedly to see those thought patterns coming up and to release them and keep returning back to direct experience. However, inevitably, when we work to release patterns of thought like that, there's emotion beneath it. And so one has to deal with the emotions that then arise. But the long and short of it is, if we have a pattern like that that's in our life that's causing us pain, it's only human to have those, but there's something we can do about it if we really take it on. We can't judge ourselves for having these issues in the first place, because after all, by the time we were old enough to start looking at our conditioning, a lot of it was in place. If we have those kind of internal voices that tell us we won't be successful, or we don't have what it takes, or we're not good enough, we would not have imported those in there on purpose. They came from our upbringing, from our society, from our culture, our teachers, our parents, our peers, those around us. By the time we took notice of it, it was many of what makes up our internal story of who we are was already built. So oftentimes when we're struggling with negative self-talk, there's something we need to forgive ourselves for. We've done something and we keep beating ourselves up in our own minds and hearts about it, right? Or we've had a failing that hurt others, or, one way or another caused pain. And I encourage us that the simple method of letting go of our thoughts and returning to direct experience of reality, which is what we do in Zazen all the time, this can be used very constructively to work on particular patterns of thought. Of course, we have to do it not just on the cushion, but in our daily lives as well. And this is all stuff that gets in the way of us realizing our true nature. These are the things that stand in the way of our true nature, our conditioning. So gratitude is his next pillar. Think of 3 or more people or things that you're grateful for in this situation or in your life right now. Can you find ways in which your problem is actually contributing to your life and growth? Are there people or things that are supporting you to face this challenge? It strikes me that in the social political situations that we're dealing with now in this country, it's easy to see it through a very dark lens, isn't it? But running across this really made me think about the gratitude side. And the truth is that some of the checks and balances built into our system, and some of the legal methods to counter some of the negative directions that our society and politics are taking now, some of them are working. They are in place, and actually some of them are continuing to work. There's resources that can actually stop some of these actions that would not exist in a purely dictatorial society or authoritarian society. So it's true when I think about it that we do have opportunities and things to be grateful for that can help reset the balance. And if the human race gets through this bad spell, we have things in place that can help repair the damage afterwards. That helps me a lot, not go down a dark rabbit hole in as far as what's going to happen to our world and our culture and our country. So next one, there's two more. Compassion. So you can try this if you feel so called to do so. Put your hand on your heart or place the palms of your hands together at your heart. Have compassion for yourself and your struggles. Remember, it takes time to grow and learn. You're not meant to be perfect. Suffering is inevitable. Oh, darn, we've heard that before, haven't we? It's part of the fabric of life. There are going to be frustrations in any life. This is something I sometimes see people get in my university class, especially some of the younger students at University of New Mexico, Taos, where I teach. We always have students from every generation, so by no means are they all young. But we always have a few who are traditional college age or shortly after. And I've often seen this phenomena where we start talking about things in a deep way in the class, in addition to meditating together. And they start to realize that they're not the only ones who are struggling. And it's so common when we're young to try to hide our struggles and to think there's something wrong with us because we're struggling. And I don't know about you all, but it was a big revelation and a relief for me to realize, oh, wait a minute. Everybody has some version of struggles and difficulties, like the ones I was having at the time. It's not because there's something wrong with me. You know, it's basic to compassion practice is you know, everybody goes through some version of the same struggles, right? The way I translate the First Noble Truth for college class is if you try and use the old translation, life is suffering, forget it. No one can handle it. They'll all drop the class. I tend to retranslate it as trouble is normal. That's something pretty much anyone can understand. It's normal to have trouble in life, right? Which is really perhaps a little bit closer to what the Buddha was talking about. We all have frustrations and struggles. We can make them worse or we can make them better. So he says Dalai Lama says, there are going to be frustrations in any life. The goal is to use them as something positive. Feel the light of loving kindness shining from your heart throughout your body. Now send that compassion to your loved ones, to anyone you struggle with, and send it out to all those who are in need of love and compassion. The next one's generosity. Feel the deep generosity that is in your heart. Imagine yourself radiating this generosity of spirit to all around you. How can you give your gifts? How can you transform your problem into an opportunity to give to others? When we give joy to others, we experience true joy ourselves. That's certainly something I've experienced plenty. So those are the 9 pillars. I think they add up to 9. He's got other things mixed in, other bits of practice like breathing and such. So 8, actually 8, not 9. 9 is the student who was in my other class the other night. He wanted 9 pillars. So anyway, we have a few minutes where we can have a bit of conversation about this. Does this bring up anything for anyone? Comments, questions? Chris?